What's up, guys? Justin Brock here, and I wanted to go over a couple of the highlights of the new CMS rule proposals or changes. A lot of them have to do with marketing and the regulation of TPMOs in the agent and broker world, and so very applicable to my audience, my agents, my cohorts, my employees. And so just wanted to summarize some of the high notes. There's a lot more to this, so I'll probably do a deeper dive when I'm not faced with the temptation of staring at that instead. But a couple of those high notes. 48-hour scope of appointment rule is proposed to be axed and changed to just having to do the scope of appointment before the presentation, prior to the presentation. The 12-hour educational event rule, where you couldn't do a marketing or a sales event and right after, you had to have a 12-hour cool down period, that has been axed. That was always a completely misguided thing. In-person educational events were not causing complaints at a disproportionate rate. I would argue that they are helping the industry, but I digress. Scope of appointments allowed at educational events. So now you could actually get the SOA at the educational event. You could schedule appointments there, I'm assuming, based on that. And by the way, I'm not saying this stuff has been passed. This is all proposed by CMS. Everyone who has a stake in it should go and comment. And of course, I completely stand behind telling people that spending a disproportionate amount of your time in advocacy when your income comes from your individual production is still not a good use of time. But taking the time to go and comment on these open these questions that they're asking and these proposals they're putting and having open comments completely makes sense. There's a difference in small amounts of advocacy that are easy to run into your business, and then larger, disproportionate things like going to all these advocacy events in the middle of enrollment periods and stuff. That doesn't make any sense. So going back to some of these, call recording storage reduced from 10-year requirement to 6 years. That's a gain for sure. If that happens, that will be awesome. If you guys don't know, when you get into large scale recordings, data storage can be pretty expensive. We've had to set up an Amazon Glacier server to be able to adequately and reasonably store those call recordings. So that would reduce some of our future burden there. Relax superlative rules. So terms like best and most, it seems like they're wanting to relax the regulation on how much they push in that arena. I'd like to see exactly how that looks when the rules do come out, if they do change that, because best and most are words that are certainly in people's vocabulary, and removing them from an agent's vocabulary is difficult. It doesn't mean that they're being nefarious when they use them. Then defining separate versions of TPMOs. This will be interesting to see evolve. I can see some pros in that for sure, but I could also see potentially some cons. But I think that it is a step in the right direction. It does look like CMS has done a lot more research into the agent and broker world, and they're not demonizing us as much. Also, something that I didn't read in there or didn't write down that I find very intriguing is that they want to remove the TPMO disclaimer portion that recommends SHIP. It'll just be 1-800-Medicare. And they're also talking about making it where you do not have to read the disclaimer within the first minute of the phone call, which, by the way, is kind of weird. Hey, Mrs. Sally, blah, 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 having to read that off and knowing at that point how many plans you represent is difficult. Like for an agent or broker that doesn't have sophisticated software, they're probably just making stuff up. So that was not a good rule anyway. Some people, when they make rules, don't take into account how difficult some of those rules are to police. So anyway, and then, you have making it where you don't have to read it in the first minute. You don't have to recommend SHIP counselors, and you could actually just read the disclaimer once you knew that there was you were actually going to be presenting a plan, or that they qualified for an enrollment period, etc. So again, none of this stuff is ironclad or in a force. It is just proposals or changes. But as I wrote on my story yesterday, it is a great time to be in Medicare. There is a lot of people, there are a lot of people who have gotten out of it. There are a lot of call centers and nefarious actors that have been shut down. There are pushes towards more compliance there, and that is great in a lot of ways. But then seeing some of these rules changes does show that CMS has some pro-agent and anti-bureaucratic bullshit, and anti-unpoliceable or irrelevant rules. They even talked a little bit about how they're not positive that the call recording requirements have helped completely. I do believe the call recordings will stay, and I don't actually think that, I think the call recordings are good personally, but it is kind of funny that a field agent can say whatever they want and you just have to take their word for it, but a telesales agent has everything documented, and oftentimes they get dinged for something that's really small, like a superlative use, even though the sale was clean and the accusation against them was, I never gave them permission to enroll, when in fact, listening to the call, they most of the time did. So, but the call recordings also vindicate people, and it gives us a lot of training material to figure out who is doing the right and wrong things. So we're actually pro phone call recording anyway. But yeah, hey, great news for the industry. I hope you guys have a happy Thanksgiving. I'm going to go spend some time over there. And if you didn't see my story, check it out. We went and saw an active volcano eruption yesterday. Super awesome. Happy Thanksgiving. See you guys soon.